Addendum, there are no announcements. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest this evening? There being none. There is an upcoming open house with respect to Fort Erie Active Transportation Master Plan. That'll be this Wednesday, September the 11th at 5 to 9 p.m. here in the Town Hall atrium. There are no public meetings this evening. That takes us, there's no consent agenda, so that takes us directly to Planning and Development. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Planning and Development Services is now in session. There are no presentations or delegations. That brings me to report 7.2, PDS 48-1-2009. Supplemental report, proposed zoning bylaw amendment, 4130 Erie Road. Kim Alvarez, owner, and Greg Taras, agent. Again, the report is now on the floor for comments and questions.
Already been moved, hasn't it, Madam Clerk? Wasn't this report previously moved? So you're moving the information report?
Your Worship, yes, the information report is a brand-new report.
Sorry.
Any comments or questions? Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, I've got, so these are questions that arose from the meeting last time this was before council, and a number of questions that also I had raised with staff. So my major concern with respect to this report, and we'll get to that later, has to do with the integrity of the zoning bylaw. And I'm also concerned about the potential precedent that this particular change might make to the zoning bylaw or for the zoning bylaw and for other situations that we might find coming before us in the future. And finally, I'm concerned about the fashion in which we're often boxed in by, not often, sometimes boxed in by staff with respect to recommendations that come before us on issues that we may or may not agree with. And I'm only speaking, obviously, for myself. I can't speak for other members of council. Maybe the rest of you are supportive of the change. I have some concerns. So as an example, on page 2, the first question that was raised relative to the report and the recommendation had to do with the rationale for the limitation on the size of patios. And the explanation was that this came out of changes to the smoking bylaw, so that in 2004, council decided to put some parameters on outdoor patios. And now that there's no issue with respect to smoking on patios, this is no longer a rationale. And yet it's referred to as an ancillary use. It's still an ancillary use, and if it's not, then the bylaw should be changed to provide that you can have a patio as large as you want, regardless. But our bylaw says patio can accommodate, the capacity can be half what the indoor restaurant provides. So that part of the rationale hasn't changed. On the same page, there was a reference, on the next page, there's a reference to the sanctuary patio. And the original report makes reference to the sanctuary having a patio that accommodates 135 people. My first reaction to that was to pick up the phone and call Jason Pizza Corolla, who owns the sanctuary, and ask him whether his indoor capacity was 270, which would be twice what the outdoor capacity is. He indicated that it is. And this report confirms that, makes reference to comparisons of the size of the sanctuary patio with the proposed size of this patio. I don't think that's the issue. The issue isn't the size of the patio. The issue is the capacity of the patio, the capacity relative to the internal capacity, so that This particular proposal would permit, under the zoning bylaw, a patio of 19 seats. The report is recommending, and the owner presumably has requested, a patio of 90 seats, which is 4.5 times the size of the permitted, under the zoning bylaw, the permitted patio. So the rationale with respect to it being an ancillary use doesn't really bear up if that's in fact part of the reason why the patio capacity was established as it was. The fact that there's been no application under the bylaw to increase the size of a permitted patio, I find interesting. So since 2004, 15 years later, there's been no restaurant owner that has brought forward an amendment, which would mean that everybody that's got a patio in Fort Erie is complying, an outdoor patio attached to their restaurant, is complying with the bylaw with respect to capacity and with respect to the setback relative to music, with the exception of the sanctuary, which applied for an amendment, presumably in order to provide music within 22 meters, I think it indicated here, rather than 60, which the bylaw provides. I have some other concerns. I know that the health department was asked about this, and although the report says that the health department has no objections to the application or proposed capacity of the establishment, that's not exactly what the letter from the health department says. What the letter from the health department says is they don't have jurisdiction to deal with that. What they do is they will comment when it comes to an application for a liquor license, and at that point they'll look at it. So it's somewhat inaccurate to suggest that they have no objections because they don't have jurisdiction to comment on that. The other concern that I have is, and this is somewhat addressed near the end of the report on page 4, the impact of the zoning change on a liquor license application. And I've read the paragraph that staff has put into this supplementary report, and I'm not persuaded that the fact that whatever capacity we might grant this evening, all of the agencies, all of the commenting agencies will be aware of the fact that the town of Fort Erie Council has looked at this and has approved this type of expanded capacity. So whether it's, now, this says that the building department will look at the facility if an application for a liquor license is made, that the fire department will look at it, and that the coordinator of community liaison and business licensing will look at it. I don't know, I don't recall whether we were told that a liquor license is going to be applied for. Can't imagine that one won't be, and if not this owner, then some owner down the road. I'm concerned that we're going to be essentially saying to the ACGO, we're fine with the capacity, we think that this is completely appropriate. I have difficulty with that, and I have difficulty with the magnitude of the amendment that we're going to be granting. If in fact the town of Fort Erie is prepared to consider outdoor patios as other than ancillary to a restaurant use, then I think we should change our bylaw, period. Those are the thoughts and the concerns that I have.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other thoughts or questions? Councillor Dubineau.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to touch on a few points of this report. I want to thank staff for preparing this report, particularly some of the renderings here and the layout. I think that addressed some of the concerns about the size. I look at it, it looks consistent with what I've seen in other beach communities across Ontario. I mean, Tobermory, some other areas, I mean, it doesn't look out of sorts. So I want to appreciate or extend my appreciation to staff for providing those renderings. Just to touch on a few points, I don't necessarily disagree with the mayor that maybe we need to look at our bylaw and change it now that the smoking is no longer allowed on patios. But at the same time, certainly Ms. Alvarez has presented something here. I don't think it's necessarily fair to delay her project because we need to have a whole look at the bylaw. I think we should be considering this on its particular merits and not on the bylaw, but that's just my opinion. One point that was raised was that no restaurant owner has applied for an increase in patio size, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, Bay Beach was not what Bay Beach is now. It is a fantastic, fabulous beach, probably one of the nicest in the entire province. It only makes sense that we're going to see this kind of interest along Erie Road. And I certainly am happy to see it. I want to see Crystal Beach thrive. I want to see that kind of, sort of resort atmosphere maintained. Certainly you go anywhere else, Grand Bend, Tobermory, other areas, it's very similar there. So I think we need to have a discussion about what we want Crystal Beach to be, what we want Bay Beach to be. If you want it to be, just the cottages that are there now, that's fine. That's an opinion that's fine to have. That's not my feeling. We put millions of dollars into that beach. I want to see the economy thrive there. I remember even having people come up to me during the opening and said, now that Bay Beach is here, we're going to start seeing development and investment happen here. And I encourage that, and this is a start. And I don't want to dissuade people from having that interest in Bay Beach simply because there's concerns about our own bylaw. I want people to come to Fort Erie and invest in that community. With regards to the health department and their jurisdiction, I mean, this is something that's covered by the building code. If we had a restaurant that was going to have that many seats and it had a roof over it, I don't think this would be an issue. Certainly it's building code. I think there's fire. I don't know if we would be involving public health for any other restaurant application with that many seats if it met the building code requirements. So I'm not sure where we're going with that, but certainly it's fine to raise it. I think the issue's been addressed, and I'm fine with the response. All in all, I think the supplemental report was fantastic. It certainly made an effort, to me anyway, to see how this is going to look and what's planned. And I'm very excited for the future of Erie Road and Crystal Beach. This is a start. And honestly, I hope we see more like this because it's a fantastic area and we want people to come. And this is how we get people there. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Councillor Dubineau and also with the mayor regarding possibly looking at the bylaw. I can tell you that I do travel as well. And when I visit seasonal areas like the Atlantic Coast is a very good example, or even the West Coast, this is quite common to see, especially when you're in the lakeshore. So when I initially seen these drawings, I really didn't have any issue with the drawings because it is quite common. I think this is what I anticipated as we decided to make the investment with Bay Beach, and I do wish this developer success. But overall, we do have to be consistent throughout the town. So that's where I think that, to the mayor's point, we should probably look at bylaws overall so we can accommodate these type of changes and growth opportunities.
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. Any further comments or questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think I would have to agree with the mayor when, when we're looking at the rationale behind the original bylaw. And I can see exactly where they were going. They wanted, half the people that are in a bar or a restaurant, if they want to go out and have a cigarette, they could go out onto a patio and they could take a drink with them, or they could even, I don't know if they were eating out there or what the arrangements were, but I can see how that worked out. And then there was no smoking at all on patios. So now, when you look back at it, probably the patio issue would have never came up in the beginning. because this all came up because of smoking. And so there is a bylaw in place, and this is asking to open that bylaw 4.5 times what the bylaw applies for. But at the same time, we have a little bit of a unique situation. So I'm not in favor of ignoring a bylaw. That's why we have bylaws in place, to protect each other. And more importantly, a lot of the bylaws are to protect ourselves from ourselves so that people can't just do whatever they want to do. And so we have to respect the fact that the bylaw is in place. And I don't have a problem with giving permission to have an outdoor patio, right? And the bylaw says that you can have half of your capacity inside. But maybe in this case, we could allow for a 90-seat patio. But I think I agree with them. We got to figure out how we're going to handle this. I don't think we just ignore the bylaw. And but that's just on the rationale, because now my question to staff is, if we allow for 90 seats on this patio, is that the new policy in this town? Because that is what we're saying now, is you can have an outdoor patio 4.5 times your capacity for your interior capacity. Wow. We have some places that have interior 130, 180. You know, are you willing to have a patio, 500 people with live entertainment and so on and so on? This is what I'm getting at, Mayor, Madam Chair. This is what we have to look at. We have to look at the whole picture. We can't just look at one thing at a time. We have to look at the whole thing. This is going to affect everybody in Fort Erie. The restriction on the music in the report, the second, it says that there's proposed, right? They're proposing to have something, it says limitations on the way music can be played are proposed to be included in the zoning for the subject property. Well, don't we have to know what that's going to be? We're just going to say, okay, let's vote on it, then vote in favor of it, and then, well, they can do whatever they want. We need to know what it is we're voting on. They're proposing something. What is that proposal? Now we have something to vote on. And on page 4 of the report, the first paragraph, and this has got probably a little bit less to do with the whole zoning, but what had happened with the original report. And my concern is still the same. We had a public meeting, and staff, because they figured there wouldn't be too much public input, brought a public meeting and a report on that public meeting to be voted on the same night. And we have told staff that we don't want that anymore. If we're having a public meeting, we don't vote on the report the same evening. Yet, that's the way it is. And here it is again this evening. Get a secondary report, and we're voting on it again in the same night. But I can see tonight. But usually, when we have a report and then we vote the same night, the staff puts in there that we waived that because we already had the public meeting, but I didn't see that in this report. So I'm not opposed to allowing an outdoor patio, right? But I think we need to take a look at allowing an outdoor patio for 4.5 times their interior capacity. I think we need to take a look at the bylaw. If it creates some delay, I think we're better to err on the positive and err on doing the right thing rather than making a mistake for the entire town.
Thank you, Councilor Lupertz. There were a few questions I think that might want to address. This keeps turning off and on. I'm not doing it.
Thank you. I will attempt to address each of the questions that I heard. One is we certainly can take a look at the ancillary perspective on patios, and we can certainly do that. Not only, my suggestion is not for the whole town, but perhaps for the Crystal Beach area, because the Crystal Beach area is really a different area, and this is, in my opinion, at least, this is an area that we want to foster this kind of entertainment. We want to foster this kind of tourist development, and perhaps the rules in that area need to be different than the rules in other parts of the town. This one is on a one-by-one basis. This is the first one that's come forward. This is, as I've mentioned before, in an excellent location. It's kitty corner to Bay Beach, where we have chosen not to provide for food or beverages because we want to encourage people to come off the beach and have food and beverages. This is a perfect spot for that. It's right there. It's good in that perspective. There was another question about limitations on the time of the music. If you look at page 6 of 8 of the report, the first report, you'll note that planning staff have proposed a limitation on the entertainment for live acoustic entertainment and recorded music between the hours of 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. So there was a specific reference to a time frame provided in that report, and that's what we would hope to carry forward, and that we would ensure that that's dealt with through the processes as we move forward. I'm not sure if that has covered all the questions, but those are the ones that I heard.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to go back to Councilor Dubineau.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, perhaps, to Mr. Brady, I believe there's a Crystal Beach secondary plan that's being worked on right now, and regardless of however we decide on this specific request this evening, just through you, Madam Chair, is this something that perhaps could be addressed by the secondary plan?
Mr. Brady?
Through you to Councilor Dubineau. Absolutely. I think it's important to sort of deal with this one tonight, but certainly the idea of additional patios and their relationship, or whether or not they have to have a relationship with indoor areas, should be something that is addressed. And Mr. Miller is here this evening, and I suspect is taking notes, and if not, I will ensure that a note is given to him.
Any further questions? Councilor Lupertz.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Like I said before, I'm not opposed to having an outdoor patio, but if we're going to go through this exercise and then we're going to implement something now, it appears that we're looking at maybe implementing something into our secondary plan, then we're going to need some kind of direction from staff how we're going to handle this, because I'm not prepared to ignore the bylaw. I don't think that's a wise decision for this council to make, to ignore it. But if we can implement something for the applicant for now, and we'll with the intent to change the bylaw. I don't know if we could, do something in principle and then, allow because the applicant, I don't think the applicant is prepared to open tomorrow, right? So they do have some time. If they're going to be applying for a liquor license, they're going to need some time. So I don't know how we can, but I think that because what we're asked to do tonight is we're going to vote on it, yes or no, and the questions are still not being answered. Nothing's being done yet.
Councilor
Oh,
Lucas,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm having a hard time following what you're asking. Are you asking that in your opinion, you would support this because eventually it's going to happen once the bylaws, or you're saying we shouldn't be supporting? I'm
Well,
not clear on.
Well, I think
your
what the
question
mayor was saying earlier was his concern was the size and the capacity, I think, if I'm right, correct, if I'm correct. Same thing with me. I'm concerned about the difference between what the bylaw says and what we're allowing, right? And so, can we give approval for, for 30 seats with the intent that we are going to review the bylaw and that could change, or 40 seats? And I don't know how we can go about doing that. Well, I mean, we're going to have to look for staff for some kind of direction on that.
Again, I would think that that's not on the floor tonight. It's the request for 90 seat capacity. And I don't think they're looking for variations. There's not option A, option B, option C. So I would think that if this gets defeated, they can, I would imagine, reapply with a different number, or perhaps wait until the bylaw gets addressed and then reapply once the bylaw's in place. Would be more specific in regards to the,
Yeah, I mean, we can look for staff. I'm not, like I said, I'm not opposed to having a patio out there. I agree. Yes, we need some private sector investment. I agree with all of that. But, and Mr. Brady made a suggestion that, well, then why don't we have something specific for Crystal Beach? I'm fine with that, right? But approving what was in front of us tonight, that's all gone. We can't say, well, it's specific to Crystal Beach, because we voted on it, and now it's open to the whole town of Fort Erie. I don't think we can do it that way. I mean, I'm looking for other people to come around us. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing something, but I don't think that we can just do this right now, approve it, and then make changes and then make some different rule later on. Mayor Reddick, maybe you can help me. You have lots of experience on council.
thank you, Councillor Lupert. Are you finished? Because I see that Councillor Butler had her hand up.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back to the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, to follow up on that line of thought, how long would it take to get that bylaw addressed?
Mr. Brady?
Through you to Councillor Butler, the Crystal Beach secondary plan will not be coming back to council till likely the end of the year, or perhaps even into 2020.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very sensitive to business and the expense that one takes to get their business up and running can be quite high. So I'm very sensitive to these people, but I don't know that a patio would necessarily be opened now that we're heading into fall and winter, and I do agree with what the mayor had said and suggested. So I don't want to stall anything, but if we could move up the timetable to get that bylaw addressed, that would resolve any issue that's in front of us right now, I would think. So my question then would be, Madam Chair, when can we push that bylaw to come to council so that we can address it?
Councillor Butler, are you making the suggestion then that we deal with this bylaw outside of the neighborhood plan? Mr. Brady, how would that?
If council directs us to review the patio bylaw as it relates to Crystal Beach and put that through as a priority, it could be back to council probably in November.
Councillor Butler? Mayor Redekop?
I just wanted to say that the report that's before us right now is for information purposes, so we probably should be voting on this, and then we can deal with the substantive report, which is next on the agenda. And aside from the suggestion of dealing with the aspect of the portions of the zoning bylaw that deal with patios sometime prior to the end of this year, I suppose that can be made known to the people who are, like the focus group in particular of the Crystal Beach secondary plan process, so that they're aware of it. They could provide some feedback. I mean, it seems like seems as if we have a zoning bylaw provision that is raising no interest in the community. It seems like there's nobody that's really too concerned about this other than me. And so I think it would be helpful, though, if we embarked upon a process whereby we at least get our zoning bylaw in line with something that will have application either specifically in Crystal Beach or elsewhere. Because I can think of the restaurants, even in Crystal Beach, that could put up significant patios if they had no parking spaces and just utilize the balance of their property. I can think of 3 off the top of my head right now. And these would be patios that would far exceed half of the capacity of the indoor. I mean, even if you looked at Sanctuary in Ridgeway, which has more space outside, I mean, if we were to allow 3 or 4 times the internal capacity, they could theoretically have a patio of, 200, 300 people. They've already got their permission to do music. So I think it would be, I think we should vote on this supplementary report and then get to the main one and then decide whether we're going to defer that pending a receipt of the report from staff relative to these specific zoning bylaw provisions. And then if we were to amend those, that at least means that we'd be in an area where we're at least having regard to our bylaw and not completely simply disregarding it because it seems like a good idea. It does seem like a good idea. It's obvious location. And I guess I would agree with Councillor Noyes. The owners may be hoping to get their outdoor patio up before Thanksgiving, but I mean, realistically, I don't know what's going to be lost on that if they know that we're working in the direction that may facilitate them.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question, if there's no other questions. I have one question. How many exits from the patio will there be? I'm looking at the diagram and I didn't quite see how you would get. Is there just the one exit? Okay. Okay, thank you. Seeing that there's no further questions, all those in favor of voting on the information report? Okay, the report is carried for information purposes. That brings us to proposed zoning bylaw number 4130 Erie Road. Kim Alvarez owner, Greg Taras agent. That was already moved. Okay, so it's back on the floor. Any comments or questions on this? Councilor Dubineau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to reaffirm my previous position on this issue. I think this is actually very consistent with what we want to see happen in Crystal Beach. I know the mayor had mentioned that there were other restaurants in the area that he could see happening. I would highly encourage them, if they have an interest in doing this, to apply. I'd love to see them do it. I'd love to see this kind of growth happen in Crystal Beach and see people walking down the road and going into restaurants and seeing people there. I think it's fantastic, and the thought of seeing that happen, actually, it kind of gives me goosebumps thinking of what could be there. And with the amount of money that we put in that beach, I get the idea of zoning bylaws and why we have the zoning bylaws. But at the same time, we have hundreds of site-specific bylaws or site-specific zoning bylaws in Fort Erie. I mean, that's why the Planning Act gives us that power to do site-specific bylaws, so we can address these issues on a case-by-case basis. And if we had another individual present this, we would look at the merits of their individual application and we'd either support it or not support it. That's why we have this ability as a council here and why we were elected to make these decisions. So to that end, I'm concerned, knowing that they have to have the zoning bylaw in place to be able to apply for a liquor license and do a lot of the background work leading up to them being able to open in this, for the May 2-4 weekend. I'm very concerned about pushing this back. I think it does need to be looked at as part of the secondary plan and perhaps even across the whole town if this is an issue that was originally put in place because of smoking laws, which have now changed. Maybe we should have changed this a long time ago. I don't know. I wasn't here. So to that end, yes, let's look at it. But I don't want to penalize a business owner who is willing to invest in Crystal Beach, something we've wanted to see happen in this community for so long. We wanted to see it happen so much that we spent millions of dollars upgrading Bay Beach to what it is now to specifically encourage this kind of investment. I'm sorry, I don't want to delay this. I want to see this stuff happen for the spring. I want to see more people come here. I want to see more dollars spent in our community. And this is exactly what we need. I wholeheartedly support this, and I hope everyone else does too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dubineau. Any other further questions or any motion to defer? No, is there? Councilor Lubers.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Brady indicated that if we were to take a look at the bylaw, that he could have something to us in November. We're halfway through September now, so a month and a half. I don't know what the intentions are of the owner, if they're going to be applying for a liquor license. That's going to take time anyway. If an owner is going to open, right, that restaurant, it's not going to be open until next season, I don't think. So, but what I need to know is, if we address the bylaw, can we address the bylaw now and then have it so that it would be implemented in the secondary plan? Or would that just be a given? Because, I mean, we can have some zoning that is specific to an area of the town. We have that in Point Avenue. Some zoning, and that's just for Point Avenue. So I understand what Councilor Dubineau was saying, but sometimes that's what happens in business. As you run into a snag, you run into something that you didn't anticipate, and it causes some delay. And if we're going to do it specific to Crystal Beach, then I'm okay with that. But if we approve it tonight, we're approving it for all of Fort Erie.
Councilor Lubers, I don't necessarily think that's the case, because this is a
Well,
site-specific.
then someone needs to
But it
verify
does-
that.
But it does set a precedent.
Well, someone would need to verify that for me.
Mr. Brady?
Through you to the question that was asked, the issue that's before council this evening is a zoning bylaw, a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment for this property in Crystal Beach. It does not impact the rest of the town in terms of its zoning. Is there a precedence for it? Yeah, it does set a bit of a precedence, but I suggest to you that the precedence it sets is for that strip in Crystal Beach. So the answer to the specific answer to the question is no, it's not for the whole town. It's a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any further comments and questions? Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, just on that particular point, and just on the point of comfort with respect to this, I've mentioned my concern about the integrity of the zoning bylaw. And I've mentioned my concern about this establishing a precedent. The precedent doesn't apply just to Crystal Beach. The precedent would apply across the municipality. So it would make a lot more sense to me if we had a look at the zoning bylaw, if in fact it should be changed. It seems like staff is generally supportive of that, or they wouldn't have made the recommendations in this report. Then I think we should be looking at the provision of the zoning bylaw that deals with this, so that in the future, we're on much more solid ground, so that business people know exactly what the rules are. So we don't have one business person taking a look at our zoning bylaw and saying, well, I can't make a go of it because it's not adequate capacity. One taking a shot at it and being successful. I think it makes more sense if we have a review of the bylaw, and then we've got something that can either say, these are the rules with respect to patios, they apply to Crystal Beach. They may apply elsewhere, maybe somebody else in the town wants it to apply there as well. But I think that it would make a lot more sense for us to review the specific provision of the bylaw. If it can come back to us in November, I think that's fine. And then I think we'd be in a position to make a much more solid approval of the recommendations being made by staff, as opposed to what really appears on the face of it to be a wildly expanded interpretation or approval of a zoning that is quite restrictive. And it maybe only relates to the smoking bylaw. I don't necessarily believe that that's true, but I think that we should take a look at the bylaw, and I'd be in support of a motion to defer this to allow us to do that.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Dubin, would like another opportunity, unless there is a motion to defer. You're not making a motion to defer. You are making.
I can't. I've
You
spoken
can't.
to it.
So the only one who can is,
This is now the bylaw. People that spoke on the last report.
okay, they still
speak on
can.
this report.
Okay. So I'll give Councillor Dubin another opportunity.
And I appreciate that, Madam Chair. On the topic of precedents, whatever we decide tonight, whether we decide in favor of this or whether we decide against it, we're setting a precedence. It's a question of, are we setting a precedence that we want to see this kind of investment happen in Crystal Beach? Or are we going to play around and make things difficult for people who want to invest in our community? And I understand those concerns about looking at the bylaw, ensuring that things are, handled appropriately for specific neighborhoods. That's why we have the power to do site-specific bylaws for zoning, and why the Planning Act grants us that, so that we can look at each application on a case-by-case basis and apply and look at that, how it fits into the neighborhood, and make those decisions, because that's why we were put here. I'm concerned about the precedence this sets if we defer this again and again and again, if we say no, if we do something to make it difficult for someone to do business in this community when we've spent so much money on that beach and tried to turn it into a destination for this entire province. I mean, what are we telling people who want to set up another restaurant or want to set up another shop or something, that we're doing this when someone puts in an application? I'm concerned about that precedence it's setting. Are we looking to see this kind of activity happen in Bay Beach and on Erie Road? I mean, I've had people come to me over the years and say, this place is so sleepy, there's nothing going on here. We've put so much effort into doing our best to change that community for the better. And for better or worse, we've had discussions about the future of that area of town and what we want to see. And I'm concerned about the precedence it sets if we just start playing games like this, because we have an application, it's consistent with what you see in coastal and lakefront communities all across North America, perhaps even the world. I'm
going to stop you for a moment, Councillor Dubin. No. I would appreciate if council was not having another discussion.
I thought you were telling me not to.
I'm just asking, is that, Councillor Dubin deserves the attention. He's speaking. I see there's a number of others.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, but I think I've made my point. I think we'd be setting a precedent regardless of what we do tonight, and it's a question of what kind of precedents we want to set. I know what kind of precedents I want to see, what kind of precedent I want to set for Erie Road and Bay Beach. I'll let others decide themselves how they want to proceed.
Hey, Councilor Lupers, I did see your hand up earlier. Is it up again or not?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to comment on Councilor Dubenow's comments, setting a precedence and what has happened in other communities happened in other communities. Who are we to say that those other communities that have all these patios up against the sidewalks and that didn't go through the same thing that we're going through tonight? We don't know that. So we have to be diligent in our decision-making. And I agree with the mayor that if there's a problem with something, there's no problem with holding back to make sure that we get it right. But just to comment, the mayor made some comments about there was nobody seemed to be concerned about the zoning bylaw. And when I read the reports and I read the comments, most people weren't concerned about the patio. I don't know that when they were going through it, they were looking at the zoning and how it's going to affect, the entire town or the entire area. And as far as deferring, I would like to put the motion forward to defer.
Again,
And I don't know that I can't, because I'm reading our rules of procedure, and there's nothing in there that says that if you've already spoken, you can't put a motion to defer or postpone. It's section 14.6. I'm not reading it.
I'm going to direct that to Ms. Schofield.
Generally, the rules provide that if, before you can do that, if any other members of council wish to speak, they should be allowed to have that opportunity to speak. Then if you've exhausted everyone, then you can move the motion.
Yes, but if you have spoken, you can still put the motion forward. Is that correct?
I think she was agreeing with you in that, but just that before the motion for defer, if you've already spoken on it, that other members of council would also have an opportunity to speak before the defer motion.
Well, what I'm hearing is if you have already spoken, you can't even bring the motion forward.
No, that's not, that's not, if my understanding is correct, Councilor Lupert, you are correct. There is nothing in the bylaw under deferral that says that you cannot make a motion to defer if you've spoken to it. You are correct on that, is what I understand from
Yes,
Ms.
yes,
Schofield.
okay.
But before you make the
Yeah,
motion.
I'm not putting the motion forward. I'm just saying I would like to put the motion
Okay,
forward.
so
but
I'm going to make sure that all members of council want an opportunity to speak. I said, Councilor Butler, your hand was up again for the first time for this one.
Second time for this one, but thank you. I'd like to get some clarification because I'm not sure that I'm understanding what the rush here is. I understand that this business would like to get approval for the patio and that you'd like to have something in October for Thanksgiving. But having said that, if we were to address the bylaws in November, this would be ample time for them to still have approval for their patio for the spring, just in time for them to open for the spring. Is that correct?
I can't anticipate what their plans are for opening, so
Madam Chair, can we find out?
can we ask the question of the... I'd be happy to ask someone to answer that question. But just let us know who you are.
Okay, so we've been waiting.
Excuse me, can you give your name?
Sorry, oh, it's Kim Alvarez, the owner. We've put in the application January 31st to actually have this patio. Didn't realize that there was a bylaw restricting size and building and so forth, so started the process. Didn't realize it was going to be grading, drainage, so forth. So when you were talking about timeline, we've been waiting for this since about January 31st, hoping that this would maybe be a May opening. Many things are actually contingent upon this decision, okay? So before we can actually apply for the liquor license, that patio has to be completed. They have to come and do an inspection. All these different departments with the city will have to come and do an inspection. So until this patio is done, I can't open a restaurant. I have gravel around this establishment, which I was told by staff, don't do anything, because wait for the decision. So we have about a 12-foot step to get into the establishment. I can't get health in. I won't be able to get any approvals to open a restaurant until this decision is made. So it's very, very important to me in terms of income and so forth, waiting on us to be able to open a restaurant and get an income. So yeah, your decision is really important.
Thank you.
The issue here is with respect to capacity. Is that not the case, Madam Chair? And if you could just give me your point of view with respect to why it would be important to delay this versus to approve this, that would help me out in my decision-making process as well.
I will share my opinion. My opinion is basically I agree with the mayor that the capacity of 90 of four-time the allotment is pretty significant. I would like to see it go hand in hand with the bylaw as opposed to us setting a precedent and then that precedent being used for other locations that may or may not fit the same scenario. I can appreciate, my sympathy does go to the owner that may delay some of the plans to open the restaurant. But again, we're talking specifically about the patio. We're not talking about the restaurant. So I'm not sure how delaying one prevents some progress happening the other. So that's my opinion.
I just have one further question then, and perhaps Mr. Brady can answer this question. If the delay for the patio, if the patio decision is delayed and it's deferred until the bylaw is dealt with and then brought back in a timely manner in November after the bylaw is dealt with, does the proponent have an opportunity to get that approval for their liquor license in time for the May 2/4 start?
Mr. Brady?
Through you to the councillor, to the best of my knowledge, from what I just heard from the proponent, it's not just the approval, the patio must be in place. If it,
So a winter
we can
build
build
would
it
be
in the
bad.
fall, but you can't really build it in the winter.
No, right, because of the laying of the concrete. So if the issue is the capacity for the patio, could we lower the capacity for the patio for the interim and then have it come back to council for an increased capacity? Would that be a resolution?
If you're looking for an answer from me,
I'm Mr. Brady?
okay. There's the capacity of the patio is based on what can fit on that patio. So you've seen the plan and you look to the report that was provided this evening, you'll see the patio and you'll see the different tables outlined on the patio. So I think there's two issues. One is the size of the patio and the other is the capacity of the patio. Certainly, as long as council would have agreed to the patio being built to the size as identified, that might provide for them to move forward. But if council is determined to restrict the size to something, to the amount of seats on the patio to something less than the size is identified, that's a possibility. In all honesty, I firmly believe that large patios of this type on Erie Beach is the kind of thing that we need. And I think that it's different than the rest of the town. And I've heard tonight that the council may or may not agree with me on that, and that's certainly within their purview to do. But I can tell you that when we bring back a report after looking at the idea of an ancillary use, one of the suggestions that we will be making, or recommendations we'll be making, will be to treat this section of Erie Road differently than the rest of the town. This is your tourist. This is one of your main tourist areas. Certainly in my hometown in Niagara Falls, they don't treat the tourist area, the residential areas, the same as the tourist areas. So that's where I'm coming from. I know that's not going to make everybody happy, but that's the thought pattern that we're at.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I was leaning towards deferring this, but now that I have clearer vision on the situation, I think that it's important for us to decide on this matter tonight, only because I can appreciate where the proponent is coming from in terms of being able to build while there is still time to build before the winter months hit us. And it becomes difficult to have an outdoor pour of concrete because it doesn't settle properly, and then she'll have bigger issues later on to deal with this. And if she's already been, or they've already been putting money towards this project, I can appreciate how fast money depletes and these costly time delays. So I'm actually going to support this, but I'd like to see the bylaw still come forward very quickly so that we can also deal with that in November as well. That's where I stand.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I have a question first for Mr. Brody in regards to the size. I wasn't clear on whether you were saying that they can go ahead and build the patio and hope the council will then allow the capacity that that patio could hold, which would not necessarily prevent them from doing the patio, but then they would be basically, you know, they might have a big patio that council only allows 30 people on or 40 people on. Am I correct on that understanding? That they could still go ahead and build the patio?
If council this evening decides on the recommendation in the report that's before you, then the size of the patio and the capacity of the patio would be one and the same. Okay? If council wanted to somehow allow the size of the patio to be built, but say restrict it to, I don't know, 60 seats until the review has been done, that would at least allow the Alvarezes the opportunity to build the patio. They would be taking a risk as to whether or not it would be 60 or 90 or 75 or whatever, but it would provide them some assurance to that effect. So if council wants to approve it, the patio as is with the 90, that's before you. If they want to provide for something else, then that motion should be made.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Lupertz, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to ask a question of Mr. Brady. And if I remember correctly, the owner was here, and she said that she filed her application in January. And if she filed in January, then why was it not until August before we saw the application?
Mr. Brady?
This application was dealt with in queue, as all other applications are dealt with in the town. There are questions that are raised by planning staff and by other staff that need to be addressed by the proponent as we move forward. As soon as those questions were completed and we had the capacity at staff to deal with the issue, it was brought forward.
Councillor Lupertz, does that answer your question?
Well, that answers why. But now my next question is, well, staff has 8 months to ask questions. It looks like to me that this was pretty clean cut. You got a piece of property here, you want to put 90 people on it. Wasn't very complicated to me, but you had some questions. But we get a report on Wednesday, and we got to deal with it on Monday. Exact same issues get brought up, exact same questions have to be asked. And we got to do it before 10 o'clock Otherwise, we got to make an amendment to our meeting. I'm not buying this timeline, right? This was a pretty simple application in my eyes, right? And that could have been brought forward to council a lot sooner. But if we're going to allow staff 8 months for a minor variance, this is minor in the report, right? And it takes 8 months, and we only get a couple days.
Again,
I'm sorry, but I'll go ahead with the change, but I'm not happy with somebody making an application in January and we don't see it until August.
thank you, Councillor Lupertz. Councillor McDermott, did you have your hand up?
Well, I think we've had a good debate about this, and it always comes back, as far as I'm concerned, I understand the mayor's angst about the bylaw. I also understand the angst of the people that are trying to make a living here. And I wouldn't think that the bottom line's that plentiful that they can go through a lot of delay. I guess the question that hasn't been asked is the one that Councillor Luberts was mentioning at the last meeting. He wanted to check back with the BIA with regards to this project, yet we've not heard one word about that this evening. I think we need to make changes to the bylaw, but I don't think that, I agree with Mr. Brady with regards to where this is. I think it would be a big benefit and a good compliment to what we've done down at the beach. So I'll be supporting this evening.
Any further comments or questions? And seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? All those against? The recommendation carries. That brings us to PDS 50, 2019. PDS 49, 2019. The Planning Development Services Development Building and Bylaw Statistical Reporting Second Quarter. Thank you. Councillor Zanko moved it. This report is now on the floor for comments and questions. Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, just wondering if we can get some information at some point with respect to the parking revenues that we've received vis-a-vis the parking fine revenues, because it appears that parking fine revenue has gone down, but that's probably because there's more people paying for parking. I wonder if we could just get that at some point.
Mr. Brady?
Certainly, we can provide statistical analysis on the parking revenue, and we'll provide that in a memo to council.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? All those in favor of the report? The report carries. That brings us to PDS, 50, 2019, the Garrison Road Fort Erie Site Plan Agreement, south side of Garrison Road. That report is moved by Councillor Dubineau. The report is now on the floor for comments or questions. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When this report came forward, or when they came forward a few months ago, there were a number of concerns at the public meeting, and before I can make a decision on this, I need to know that I am protecting the constituents that live in that area who asked me to address their concerns, which were the contamination of the well water and the runoff. And I do know that they are going to be going with greenhouses, but it still does not preclude the possibility of that well water contamination. So I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if you could ask that question.
Mr. Brady?
I would direct all of council to the Appendix 4 to the report, which has a number of special provisions in it. And we talk, in number 4, the owner is responsible for disposal of exact materials and those kinds of things and storage. I'm not sure if that completely answers the question that you had raised, Councillor Butler, but that was our attempt to do so.
Councillor Butler? Page 4, do you find the answer to your question?
So it's page 4, Appendix 4.
Last page.
Appendix 4.
Schedule H, it's under Appendix 4. It's special provisions, the very last page to the report.
What number then? It's
Number 4,
number 4?
it speaks to,
Okay, but that doesn't tell me, though, about how they're going to protect the well water that most of my constituents rely on.
Brady?
if that is not sufficient, then if council wishes to, they could put in an additional special provision, which would be, I would assume, and I'm sort of taking words out of your mouth, that there be a groundwater monitoring to address that, and that could be added as a special provision.
Councillor Butler, would you like that added?
I'd like that added, yes, but I'd also like to find out how that gets captured. And is it recorded on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis? And then what is the responsibility of the landowner to ensure if there is contamination, how are they going to mitigate that problem?
Mr. Brady?
The issue of the frequency could be addressed through saying groundwater monitoring or reported to council, if you will, on an annual or quarterly basis. That could be a special provision. If it is determined that it's not satisfactory, then I would assume that that would have to be addressed.
Madam Chair, I'd like to see that an amendment be made to this then that would include the monitoring of the groundwater on a quarterly basis and reporting to us on a quarterly basis, because then we can catch it if something does happen. The way that they have it structured, and I don't know, I know that it's personal marijuana use, not a distribution for pharmaceuticals, just personal licenses that they are working on and growing on behalf of others that have personal licenses, and I understand that their license is up to about 300 plants. But nonetheless, I don't know that there's going to be outdoor grow anymore. I think it's all contained into those greenhouses, but if they're not using natural ways, such as, bugs, to address their concerns, they're going to be using contaminants, and I don't know if it's going to be organic or not. So if it's not organic, there is the risk of running contamination to the local well water. So I'd like to see that amended.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Are you putting that amendment on the floor?
Yes.
Do you want to kind of state it clearly for the clerk? No.
Yes. So I would like to, pardon me? For the best.
What I have is that Councillor Butler has moved an amendment so that it says, subject to a condition that the groundwater monitoring take place on a quarterly basis with a report to council on a quarterly basis.
Councillor Butler, does that satisfy?
That does satisfy me, thank you.
Okay, the amendment is now on the floor for comments or questions. Mayor Redekop?
Just wondering why council would need to get a quarterly report. As long as staff has it, wouldn't that be adequate?
Yes, that would be, yeah.
Okay.
So we can change it back to staff, and if something came up, then I'm sure that they would apprise us.
Okay, any further comments or questions on the amendment? Counselor Luberts?
So we're changing the amendment to staff will get the quarterly reports?
Yes, I think it was considered a friendly amendment.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Being no further questions on the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment carries. Counselor Butler, did you have any further questions? Counselor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the appendix 2, I guess it would be, they show the layout of the greenhouses. And, but, just hold on with me. It says that on page 3 of the report, it says all water for irrigation of the plant material will be taken from the proposed stormwater management pond proposed for the south side of the greenhouse buildings. And can staff just kind of direct me, where's the, on appendix 2, where's the pond? I don't see it labeled here.
If I,
Yeah,
oops, sorry, if I can assist, there's a almost round structure shown, I think Mr. Walsh is showing it to you, which is to the right of the greenhouses themselves, right and lower.
Right above 20 greenhouses? Right above
Exactly.
the sign, okay.
Mhm.
with the oval that says refer to grading drawing for elevation.
Yes,
That's the extent of a,
that's the
that's all
location.
the water they need?
That's the location.
Mr. Brady, would that, I think Councilor Lippert is going, would that be enough?
If they need any additional water from there, they would need to either import it to the site.
Councilor Lippert?
Are they going to have any, are they gonna have their own well water? I don't assume there's town water there, so
I
if they're
don't
gonna have
believe-
any water,
I
they
don't
would have to
believe,
have well.
there's nothing in this application, nor is there anything on this site plan that identifies that there would be a well.
Councilor Lippert?
No? Okay, so my concern is if they run out of water with this stormwater management pond, or if we don't, if the weather doesn't provide the stormwater management pond with water, they're gonna have to get water somewhere else. And if they put my concern is if they put a well in there, I have been informed over the past few weeks, and it's nothing to do with this here, but St. John's Church is having a problem. They're on Ridgemount Road. And they're having a problem with their well. The water's running out. I think they had Furness in there looking at it, and they said that they only got about 5 feet of water left in their reserve, right, in their well. And so if we're gonna have this building here, these greenhouses, and we need some reassurance that, you know, we're not gonna be putting another burden on the water supply, I guess. I don't think that we can say, no, you can't put a well in, but we have to be concerned about it.
Mr. Brady, can the council or the town put any restrictions on putting any wells on the property to service the facility?
The site plan identifies that there's no wells that are proposed. If there was a well that was proposed, the Ministry of the Environment is the appropriate provincial agency that reviews whether or not there is the potential for capacity for a well at that location. But if there's no well identified on the site plan, I don't believe that they should be putting in a well until they would come with an amendment to their site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Councilor Lippert, does that somewhat
Yeah,
answer your
all right.
question?
Well, if there's no well, I guess there's no issue, right now.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Dubenow.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, we have the report in front of us here, which addresses the site plan, and I know throughout the rest of the region and perhaps even here in town, there's been some concerns about almost these, I guess you could call them cooperatives of sorts, where people just go in and they start growing, and there's not a lot of oversight from a municipal perspective. And I'm just wondering, for my own satisfaction here, I'm just wondering if perhaps through you, Madam Chair, if someone in planning can just confirm that this would be a licensed facility that would be under Health Canada guidelines regarding noxious emissions and things along those lines, and that residents who live in the area, other than unforeseen, mechanical failures and stuff like that, which can happen and have happened, but get addressed, that this is something that is going to be licensed, it is going to be operating under the bounds of the law, and that residents in the area should not expect too much disruption from what's going on. I'm just wondering if planning staff can confirm that.
Mr. Brady?
To my knowledge, this is to be a licensed facility, but also as part of your question, there was commentary a little bit about, I'm going to paraphrase a bit, about odors and stuff like that. That's not been covered. I've had some discussion with some councillors on that matter, and if there is specific interest in ensuring that odors are addressed in a full way, then I would suggest that you may want to consider an additional special provision.
If I can just comment on that, I think what we're looking for is a mechanical smell reduction system, if somebody wants to make an amendment to put that on the table.
Yes, and I would like to make an amendment to put that on there, just to ensure that this is not going to be an issue in the immediate area.
So the amendment is now on the floor for it to include, the bylaw to include a mechanical smell reduction system. Be a requirement on site. Any comments or questions? Councillor Lupertz.
Yeah, can somebody just give a little explanation on what that is? I'm thinking that, is that like filtration, exhaust filter?
I'll let I'll let Mr. Brady answer that question. I actually had a discussion with him today on this. So Mr.
All
Brady,
right, okay, yeah, just a little.
We have
he is prepared for the question.
we have two facilities in town, which I think you're aware of. One was just opened last Friday, and the other is on Jarvis Street. And both of those facilities have mechanical systems in place to address the issue of smell associated with their facility.
Councillor Lupertz?
So that's what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, okay.
Okay, seeing that there is no further, Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Brady. Just wanted to get some clarification on future enforcement. So I understand based...
We're talking on the amendment right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I understand based on the appendix and the amendments that Councillor Dubenow had made in addition to the initial amendment. Say later on down the road, there becomes an issue, permits have already been given. What type of enforcement mechanisms would we have after the fact? Or would enforcement be then done through Health Canada?
Actually, the amendment right now is specifically for the mechanical smell reduction system.
I can save my question until after we
Just-
pass this.
yeah,
Sure.
it's an excellent question, but let's get this passed first.
Fair enough, yes.
Hopefully. All those in favor of the amendment? The amendment carries. Now, Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you understand my question, Mr. Brady, or did you want me to repeat that?
I think I can address it, if you will. So what the town has is, we'll have a site plan and a site plan agreement with the owner, and that will be on title moving forward. So the special provisions 1 through 11 now, as identified in Schedule H, are issues that we will be addressing with them and throughout their development process, and we'll expect them to continue to adhere to them. We have no control over licensing. We have no control over whether or not they distribute this appropriately. We have no control over whether or not they have 400 plants there when they're supposed to have 300 plants. Those issues are to be addressed predominantly by the federal government, but as I've found over the last little while, some of those issues are more effectively addressed by the NRP to the degree that they can. So if the license says 300 plants and the NRP goes out there and they count 400 plants, they take action.
Councillor Zanko?
Thank you. And just a further comment to what Mr. Brady has mentioned. I am personally a bit sensitive to this. I've had a number of issues quite similar with NRP enforcement only. So I'm not sure I'm going to be supporting this evening, and it's simply because of the issues that I've seen.
Any further comments or Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to just clarify a couple of things, and then I'm not really sure, but I believe they already have their license, but it is not, but it's for personal use. Is that correct? Yeah, they're in the audience.
I don't know.
Yeah, because if it was the alternative where they're actually producing, they would need to put certain levels of security and have an evidence package that they would have to submit to the Ministry of Health, which in this instance they would not, because they already have personal use licenses. So it's totally different from what we see at Stevens Greens in Stevensville that had their grand opening on Friday. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, the amended motion is now on the floor. All those in agreement? All those against? Motion carries. That brings... As amended, I'm sorry. That brings us to PDS 51 2019 PDS Staffing Recommendation Report. I'd like to
I'll move that.
move by Mayor Redekop. The report's now on the floor. Mayor Redekop.
Just a few questions. Excuse me. It's apparent that there's been an increase in building activity and obviously a need for some additional staff, so the request isn't unusual. What is the current turnaround time for building permit applications?
Mr. Brady?
I believe the last time I spoke to the CBO on this, I was informed that we are about 4 to 5 weeks from the time of an application till when the application is being provided.
And the target time is 10 days?
Target time is 10 days.
Do we have any triage mechanism? So when an application comes in, do we take a quick look at it to make sure that everything is at least on the face of it in order, so that if there's something that needs to be added, we at least send it back to the applicant so they don't have to wait 4 to 5 weeks to find out that they're missing something?
Mr. Brady?
We through to the mayor, we attempt to triage as best as we can, particularly on the smaller ones and the residential permits. We have a person at the front desk who has some background and can take a quick look to make sure that most of the I's are dotted and most of the T's are crossed. However, when we get into the actual review of it, there may well be questions that are raised in terms of the standards that have been brought forward, and those go out as soon as we can. When it comes to the larger applications, particularly some of the bigger, larger applications, we're restricted to only having the CBO have the technical ability to look at these applications. So while we very much want those applications to move as smoothly as possible, sometimes there are slow-ups in that respect. We're doing as best as we can with those, and the CBO is certainly putting in the overtime to try to get those out the door. And we do prioritize in terms of industrial and commercial operations to the best of our abilities.
Thank you.
Mayor Redekop,
Thank you.
anything further? I have a question in regards to, and Mr. Brady and I had a discussion earlier today about the staff complement changes from the years we're quoting the change in the increased in development from 2014 to 2019. And how has the staff complement changed during that period?
Thank you. The answer to your question is that the building department has increased in terms of one building inspector during that period. That was about 4 years ago that we brought an additional building inspector online. And last year, council approved the use of an additional engineering technician to deal with the back end of the subdivisions. And that person has now been in place not quite a year.
Thank you for that explanation. All those in favor of the report? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Lupers, I didn't see your hand up earlier.
Yes, thank you very much. I just looking at the needs for the additional planner and the need for the building official on page 3. Did staff, and I guess I'll ask Mr. Brady, has staff looked at taking some of these issues or some of these to a third party? And what I'm saying is, well, the reason I'm asking is there's some of the building permits, they're getting more complex, right? And they refer, I think those were, some of the commercial ones. Well, if we're behind, would we not want to go to a third party, have the third party review? And I'm just wondering if staff has looked at that.
When it comes, Ed, are you needed?
Is your wife cooking again?
When it comes to the building official, if we could find a building official right now that we could bring in on a consulting basis, we would have brought them in. More importantly, if poor Thorold could find one, I believe they're now 60 days behind in terms of issuing the building permits, and they cannot find someone to assist them. You would have to bring them on staff, or you would have to go to there's a couple of groups out of Toronto, but they are fully occupied. The whole notion in terms of building officials right now is there's a need for additional bodies to enter this profession. The last 2 individuals that we hired on staff, which are working out extremely well, both of them had 0 experience in terms of being a building official. They had the appropriate academic backgrounds. They had been in the building industry, but we are, if you will, creating our building our officials as we speak. They're doing very well. They're excellent staff, and they're coming on stream. But this isn't the type of occupation that you can simply go out and find someone easily to come in and do the work for you.
Councilor Lupers?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And is this, we're asking for 2 people, and these 2 people, will this bring our turnaround times up to the requirements of the building code, the 10 days?
Mr. Brady?
I could be glib, but I won't. I think that when we have the 2 staff that we've hired recently fully up to speed, and we have a new deputy chief building official, we should be meeting all of our timelines. There's no reason why we should not.
Councilor Lupers?
And that would include the timeline for, what was the name of that bill? Bill 108?
Yes, sir.
So I guess my last question would be, when you hire, how long do you think it will be for everybody to be up to speed and that we would be at we'll be meeting all our timelines?
Mr. Brady?
The answer to that question really depends upon the quality of the individual that we hire. So the two individuals that we've hired recently, both of them are working quickly through their documentations and through their education process. The first one, I believe, should be up to speed in about another 6 months. The second one will likely be another year and a half before he's completely up to speed. If we get a deputy director or a deputy chief building official with a lot of experience, it should be a relatively short period of time to bring them up to speed. If, on the other hand, we have somebody with limited experience but with the capacity to move into this kind of position, it may take a year or more from the time we actually hire this person to have them fully up to speed and in place. The notion of building staff is extremely important in both the building department and the planning department. And as I think council is aware, particularly in the building department, we had a bit of a rejig of the building department about 4 or 5 years ago. I take full blame for that. And I believe we have a building department that will be an excellent building department in the near future.
Councillor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, it sounds to me like what I'm hearing is the planning industry is very competitive, and it's very difficult to get employees. There's not many around, and it sounds like what Mr. Brady is saying, it depends on the quality of person that we hire. And if we're going to bring in somebody on entry level or somebody inexperienced, and we're going to bring them here and get them up to speed in a year and a half, 2 years, and now they got all their experience, and now they got all their knowledge, and they decide they want to move on. If we're going to be giving these people all the experience and knowledge that they need to get up to speed on planning, then would we not be in a better position if we get some kind of guarantee that they're going to be here for 3 years, 5 years, just like we do with our doctor recruitment?
Unfortunately, I don't think we can build that in. I think that the staff will work and management will work hard on retention to make sure that the staff are comfortable here, but there's always movement. And it'd be nice to prevent it. But if they don't want to stay here, they want to move else, then I don't think there's any mechanism in place that we can stop them. Mr. Brady?
You're quite correct, but I will share with you that we have recently the staff in the building department are unionized employees, and we have signed a letter of understanding with the union concerning the training that we'll be providing to these two staff, and that the ability to then promote them from a building staff position to a senior staff position. So we're taking as proactive a position as we can on this to make sure that people are aware that if they work hard and do a good job and do their homework, that there are places for you to grow in Fort Erie. And I'm hoping that helps us as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any further questions, Councillor Luberts? I have one question in regards to the changes for the development charges being split between what we typically refer to development charges and now also community benefits. Is that going to put an added workload on your staff?
Likely. One of the things that I'll be bringing a report in the very near future to council on is hiring a consultant, actually hiring Hemson to continue with their work in terms of putting a community benefits agreement and package together for us. So that's sort of a prequel, if you will, to something that's coming. It's sitting on my desk. It's in the upper left-hand corner. So setting out the policy framework and setting out some rules, we're going to hand that off to a consultant. It's interesting because even the consultants right now are saying, well, we can't really do that yet because the rules aren't out there, but we're trying to be as proactive and ahead of the game as possible. So by having that in place, which should be in place by January 1st of 2021, if I remember correctly, that will be in place and that will provide us with a mechanism to move forward. Up until that moment in time, these fees will be handled the way that they have been traditionally. At that moment in time, yes, there will be a need to collect additional funding at that time, and it will be in part based on the value of land. So the groups that are going to become important to the town are going to be the appraisers, and the appraisers are going to be people that we have to look to provide us with some good numbers on the property values so that we can ensure that the money that we get back. So there will be a little bit more interaction with them, and there will be, it certainly won't decrease our workload, but we're hoping to have the framework in place through a consultant and to have that done well in advance so that we should chug along as we try to chug along.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. Mr. Brady. I don't know if that's a promotion or a demotion, but Councillor Lupperts.
Yes, just for some clarification, Mr. Brady, you said that the rules are not in place yet when you were talking to these consulting. Are you talking about Bill 108
Brady?
and the community benefits? And
Yes, I am referring to Bill 108. Bill 108 is in place. It's been in place a couple weeks now, but the regulations that come out of Bill 108 are not completely in place as of yet. And it's those regulations that will provide the finer detail as to how these matters have to be addressed. And we are waiting with some bated breath on both the information for not just development DCs, but also for the other legislation which has been amended through Bill 108, and there are regulations pending.
Councillor Lupperts.
yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Because when I was reading Bill 108, that's what it was. It was referring to the different areas and the amendments that they made. And Bill 108, from what I was reading, was all about the amendments that were made. How can you have an amendment without the details of the amendment? I'm confused on that. Madam Chair, maybe Mr. Brady can explain how an amendment can be open-ended.
I'm going to allow the lawyer in the room to address this issue.
Mayor Redekop.
So the amendment is just a change to the legislation. Frequently, legislation has a whole bunch of rules as to how you make the legislation operative. Those are the regulations. It's not uncommon for governments to pass legislation with the regulations to follow, because the bureaucracy wouldn't be preparing regulations until they knew that there was a piece of legislation that said, this is what we're going to do. So it wouldn't be unusual for the regulations not to be in place. The problem is that sometimes it takes a long time for the regulations. In the meantime, we all know what the statute says. We don't know what the regulations are, and so in terms of community benefits, we know that there's a proposed division of development charges into development charges and community benefits. We just don't know what the rules are that will apply to community benefits. So this isn't unusual. It's just that it puts everybody up in the air.
All right, thank you very
Councillor
much
Lupperts?
for that explanation, Mayor Redekop. And Madam Chair, the only reason I asked that is because I know when I was reading through everything on Bill 108, it said something about the community benefits bylaw, and if and there was something that said that there's a bylaw that's of no force and effect unless this is in place, but that's not there yet. So until everything comes out, we operate as normal. So nothing has affected our bylaws or our rules that we have at the town. That's why I asked the question, because if we don't have something from the province, then they can't come back and say, well, that bylaw doesn't have any force or effect because we've made amendments. But if that's the case, then I guess we're okay, right, Mayor Redekop?
They've changed the legislation, they just haven't provided us with the rules as
That's
to
right,
how
so,
we
but-
would implement them.
But nothing that we have is eliminated until the legislation come, or the regulations come out. I'm assuming.
You know what, I don't know exactly what the situation is in terms of development charges. I don't believe that it's been altered, but Mr. Brady may have some further insight into that.
Brady?
Through to the mayor. When we collect development charges today, we collect them exactly the same way as we collected them before Bill 108 was passed. There are changes to development charges based on the development charges themselves, so that there are schedules that we follow. For example, the region's development charges went up in September. Okay, that was not affected by Bill 108. That's simply a part of their structure. If we do nothing in terms of looking for a community benefits agreement and package, then by January 1st, 2021, the soft costs will be stripped out of our development charges, and we won't be able to collect them. So we'll be looking for a different mechanism, and that's what we're waiting for the rules. But Bill 108 is not just about development charges; it's about a number of things, and we're looking for some rules to come out on them as well.
Councillor Lupers?
No, that's, I just needed some clarification. Thanks.
Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? The report carries. That brings us to new business inquiries. I think, Mayor Redekop, I think you had your hand up first.
Okay, I just have 2 points. The first, I wanted to comment on this issue about cannabis growing. And Councillor Butler and I were at Stevens Green on Friday for the grand opening of their new facility, which is state-of-the-art. It's a very impressive facility. It's got 10 separate isolated growing rooms, all extremely computerized as to lighting, water, humidity, temperature, all kinds of security mechanisms. They've got a generator that they're about to be bringing online that will actually make the whole plant powered through their generation of electricity through a gas feed. They feel that the payback on that machine, which is about $5 million, will be over a relatively short period of time. I don't want to specifically say the amount of time because I'm not sure that it's achievable, but it was very extremely impressive. So that facility, which will employ approximately 70 individuals, many of whom will be skilled individuals with college and university degrees. Some of the ones that I spoke to, and I'm sure Councillor Butler, you were the same, some of them have university degrees, and then they have college diplomas, which facilitate the work that they're doing. Across the street, there's an old building, maybe a barn, and apparently there's medical marijuana being grown there. I was quite surprised at the whole process, and I understand that the police may have been out there to check, but it's very similar to the facility that we dealt with this evening, in that supposedly medical marijuana, it's supposedly someone with a license who can grow medical marijuana for 3 other people. The amount of plants is dependent upon the prescription that you get. This facility that we dealt with this evening, I believe, was in relation to people who have prescriptions for 50 milligrams per day, 50 milligrams. The one across the street at Stevensville on House Road, I believe, is for 100. person I was speaking to told me that there are some individuals who have licenses to grow medical marijuana, 150 milligrams per day. How they grow the marijuana, I have no idea, because I would assume that the impacts of the product would be such that it would make them difficult to carry out their chores. However, this facility on the west side of House Road, I don't believe has had any municipal interaction. And I'm wondering why it is that the facility that we dealt with this evening has to go through a site plan process. Apparently, the facility on House Road, west side of House Road, hasn't, or at least I'm not aware of it. Can we have comment from staff on that, please?
Brady, are you aware of that?
Aware that House Road is up and running? It is up and running, yes, absolutely.
The one across the street from the,
The one across the street from House Road, to my knowledge, has no licenses whatsoever.
Well, they have licenses, and the NRP have been out there apparently checking into it. So I'm just wondering, maybe staff could look into this and maybe provide us with an explanation as to why site plan approval required for some and not for others. Maybe it has to do with the continuing use. I don't know. Maybe it has to do with the fact that there was already a building up there. I don't know. But that leads me into my next question, if I might, Madam Chair, and that is, we now have situations where medical marijuana is being grown outdoors in residential areas. And it's not bad enough that it's one person, but as I said, they can grow for 3 other individuals that have licenses. And so now we have situations where in residential areas, there are as many as 300 plants being grown. We have apparently no control. It doesn't make any sense to me, because even the people that use marijuana tell me that these are invitations for theft. So we're going to be bringing crime into our neighborhoods. We've had a couple of situations, one we were able to close down, one that is up and operating. There are absolutely no rules. It's like the Wild West. So I'm wondering if Mr. Brady has any suggestions as to what we might contemplate as a council to try to get some control over this.
Brady?
I wish I had a full answer for you. I will give you my best advice. As I think you are aware, municipalities gain their power from the province, and the province gains their power from the federal government, and not putting the Constitution into too much question here. So we have a bit of an issue, because this is strictly a federal jurisdiction. What we have done in this town is we identified that marijuana should, if it's going to be grown, it should be grown on agricultural or industrial lands. And then we also brought in the provisions that site plans would be required. And the ones, the large operation that opened on Friday is a good example of us moving through that process. There are other examples too, and I'm sure you're all aware of them. But then there's these other smaller personal use issues, which seem to have got bound up in Court of Appeal issues and all kinds of other issues that the federal government's been involved with. And it leaves us in a bit of a quandary. Currently, we in the town say that marijuana should be only grown on agricultural and industrial lands. We don't allow them to be grown on residential lands, but we're not sure whether or not we have enough teeth to actually say, stop it. Recently, there was one that was being grown in a building in an area that we felt was inappropriate, and we asked them to stop it, and we were fortunate, and they did, and they moved on. But that's a different issue. That's an inside operation. Now, the one that the mayor has brought forward to us and to me and to the council this evening is an outdoor operation in a backyard, for want of a better way of describing it. I don't have a magic answer for this. I have suggested the following, and I'm not even sure how strong a legal grounds I'm on this, but I'm more than willing to put it out there. A number of municipalities have put in interim control bylaws trying to wrestle some control on the marijuana operation. This council may, if they wish, want to think about putting in an interim control bylaw that says you will not grow marijuana on residentially zoned lands, or for that matter, all lands other than agricultural and industrial, period. And that that interim control bylaw would stop that theoretically to occur. But you would also need to do a study to build a policy basis for moving forward. I'm not sure if you pass this interim control bylaw and it's challenged that we would win, but I am watching what Niagara Falls has done, and I'm watching what Pelham has done, and a few other municipalities, and they are putting in interim control bylaws. Theirs aren't exactly just on residential lands, but nonetheless, it sits within the same construct. So if the council is looking for some advice from me on this topic, you may want to think about putting in an interim control bylaw on the residential properties. How much teeth the Planning Act has in that as compared to the teeth of a licensing from the federal government, I guess we'll find out. But then if you do decide to do that, we will need to start a study, and this has become such a complex matter that it's beyond my capabilities to do that study in-house. And I would then bring forth as a part of the 2020 budget, a specific request for that study. So the study doesn't have to be started immediately when you do the interim control bylaw, but it has to be done within a year of that interim control bylaw. I'm not sure that's completely helpful to you, but I don't really have anything else at the present time.
Well, that is helpful, Madam Chair, if I might. So is Mr. Brady recommending that we would start this process with a report to council outlining what the parameters of a interim control bylaw would look like?
I would think so. Mr. Brady?
I'm certainly, if council would direct us to bring a report to council on an interim control bylaw to address the issue of open growing marijuana in areas outside of agricultural and industrial lands, I would be happy to bring that report to council.
Well, I'd be interested in seeing that, because I don't want to have the Wild West continue to prevail here. So, I mean, unless there's some objection to us getting staff to start to work on that report, I would think we should do that. Ordinarily, we would have a notice of motion or whatever, but if we're all in agreement.
We can waive the rules of, we can waive the rules of procedure?
Well,
Or
are we all
motion
in agreement that that this is an issue that should be looked at? Yeah, interim control in residential areas. Well, then I guess that's the direction you would require, Mr. Brady. Thank you.
I'm looking at the clerk. Do we have enough? Has it been formalized enough for you?
What I wanted to add in is that usually when you're providing direction to staff, i.e. asking for a report, the council should vote on it, so a majority vote.
Okay,
Okay, there's a request for a report.
I've moved that, yeah.
Any comments? Okay, the report's on the floor. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, can we read
Yeah.
the,
Staff proceed to provide council with a report relative to an implementation of an interim control bylaw for residentially zoned areas.
Might I suggest
Sure. Lands other than agricultural.
Councillor Lupertz?
That's what I was thinking of.
That clarify? Okay, the report is now on the floor for comments and questions. Seeing none, all those in favor? The report carries. We look forward,
Motion.
the motion carries. We look forward to the report. Okay, that brings us, I'm sorry, Councillor Butler, you also had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that we are going to, after our discussion earlier this evening, we are going to bring that bylaw forward to council for re-examination so that we can take care of that in November, as we discussed earlier.
Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, insofar as the issue immediately before us has now been dealt with, I'm wondering whether it wouldn't make sense for that to just continue on to be part of the secondary planning process, so that there will be some zoning amendment recommendations coming out of that. And I would think maybe we should just leave it in that process, since there's now nobody's gonna be building patios other than this one now. So that would be my suggestion.
I would add to that, that if someone does come forward, a request does come forward for a site plan variance and things like that, that involves this, that they kind of be told that something's coming forward, so we're not going through this again. I don't know that the timeline may be extended a bit. Okay, that brings us to business status report. BSR? Done? Planning Development Services is now no longer in session.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. That takes us into infrastructure services, and that would be Councillor Luberts.
Thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure Services is now in session. We have no presentations or delegations. We have no reports. And so that brings us to new business and inquiries. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm wondering if I could get some information with respect to the crosswalk that was supposed to be dealt with in Ridgeway by the farmers market. Is that still going to happen?
Mr. Welsh.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it's still going to happen. Both our crosswalk there and at Gorham Road have been budgeted for. Installations such as this are designed and installed by the region's traffic signal services. They are lagging because of workload. I have a meeting with the region later this week. I can inquire as to the status. I wouldn't expect it until at least mid next year, though. That far.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, the downtown Ridgeway core has been experiencing some overwhelming problems with garbage collection. And I know that the core is promised twice a week, but they're getting a minimum of one and not there too. And some days those pockets on the downtown core are missed. Is there anything that we can do?
Would that be Mr. Welsh?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I can contact the region and express our concerns. Maybe if you can speak to me offline and get more specific details.
Yes, Councillor Butler? Yeah, maybe we could suggest that at our next regular council meeting that we also bring this up to Councillor Encina, seeing that Mr. Welsh is saying that he's going to have to contact the region anyway. Looks like these are regional issues. And let's give Tom a little bit of work to do. Yeah, that seems not to be doing anything lately. All right. Any other new business or inquiries, Councillor?
Thank you, Councillor Luberts. I'm going to bring up something that I'm hoping is not going to happen, and I think I've emailed the council on this in regards to the possibility of the trains being rerouted from Niagara Falls through Fort Erie. I think we're the only south line of Niagara Falls. And I know they're looking into it. I know they're doing a study. And I think we need to be in the discussion before the train leaves the station. And I know it's a euphemism, but at the same point, that track runs right through Stevensville, a highly residential area, where there's only one gate, and the horns blow already 5 to 6 times a night. That, you know, if we're going to see the train traffic increase substantially, we need to be part of the discussion, and we need to make sure that we make each railroad crossing safe in regard to that there's arms and there's gates and there's the costs associated are not borne by the residents of Fort Erie, and that we hopefully we'll get the horns or the whistles, whichever you want to call them, not to blow if safe not to do so. But I don't know how quickly this study's going to be done in Niagara Falls. I don't know if they care what our opinion is or not. Again, it's a federal thing. That may be like the marijuana. We have no say in it. But if they're even thinking of that, I think we need to be in discussions.
Who would address that? Mr. Welsh? Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, we've contacted the Niagara Falls Department of Public Works at my peer level, and also the CAO's office at Tom's level to be included as stakeholders in their study, and they've agreed to that.
I appreciate that, but would that mean then they will keep us apprised as the study's going forward, or just keep us apprised once the study is complete, or they will talk to us in Fort Erie about how it will affect the residents?
A stakeholder in my mind, through you, Mr. Chair, is one that is involved in the discussions very early on, so that our views are known, and that outcomes of the study are communicated with us before they are published and become official.
Okay, and I'm not trying to kind of like beat a dead horse here, but at the same point, I want to make sure that they get a very clear message that we want to be involved in this discussion. This can't happen. Like I said, I don't want to find out what the outcome is. Yes, the best place to go is right through Stevensville. And oh well, you know, the stakeholders in Stevensville don't agree with this. I think, I don't know if we should, if there's some kind of a strong letter or a statement as opposed to just a phone call saying, we expect to be kept apprised on an ongoing basis, and if at any time that it's starting to look that it's going to be going through Stevensville or going through Fort Erie, that we need to be at the table.
I agree.
Mr. Welsh, are we considered a stakeholder?
Yes.
Are we at the table with them?
The,
Somebody from the town?
Chair, the study has not commenced yet. I've expressed our wishes to the city,
Okay, all right.
and they've agreed to that.
Now, would that include the region would be a stakeholder as well?
I don't know. As the initiator of the study, and it hasn't really started yet, I don't know the mechanisms that the players at the table.
Okay. Mayor Redekop, you said you
Yeah,
wanted.
I just wanted to say that I think it would be prudent for us to be in touch with CN, because they're the ones who are going to be moving their train routes. They're not going to do this. They're not going to change their schedules if it's going to be more expensive for their customers. But I don't want to rely on that. I think we should be in touch with CN. They frequently communicate with us. They run a lot of trains through here. We want to, I think, make sure that they're aware of the fact that they're going to be running more trains through here. We've got issues with
Is this CN that's implementing these changes?
their track.
Is it, there it is, yeah? All right. Mr. Welsh?
As I understand it, they would be implementing changes if they followed the City of Niagara Falls request. Niagara Falls wants to get the trains out of their municipality. We don't mind the traffic. We just want to make sure that we're not taking all of the traffic.
Traffic, from my understanding, that Niagara Falls wants to keep is the GO train. Big surprise.
They can send that to Fort Erie.
Well, yeah, we'll take, if we're gonna take the other, we're gonna take both. Well,
Well-
we should let Niagara Falls know that.
Again, I can understand Niagara Falls' position on this, but I can, as a resident of Niagara Falls, of Fort Erie, I think we need to be at the table at the beginning. I think the mayor's suggestion that we write a letter to CN to be kept apprised on an ongoing basis on how this goes. Like, okay, I've seen reports where there's like a 300, like, I'm exaggerating, there's 15 stakeholders, and there's one public meeting. And, okay, is that going to give us enough input before the study is completed? They're spending $300,000. And by the way, in the report, not in the report, but in the information that was sent to me, this has already been discussed. I mean, they talked about the line, they didn't mention Fort Erie, but they mentioned the line south of Niagara. Well, guess what line is south of Niagara Falls? It's only us. there isn't any other line. I don't recall them saying, hey, guys, we may be starting a study, and guess where we want the trains to go? They didn't bring that yet. We weren't contacted initially, like when they're thinking about it, and I'm thinking they want us to kind of like be, how do you say, sleepy dogs, so to speak, and then the train's too far down the track to change it. Too many decisions have been made, and then we get involved. I know Mr. Walsh is going to stay on it, but again, I do think that we need to keep in contact, and the mayor suggested a letter to CN, and again, some more formality than a phone call saying, listen, you know, if you're even thinking this, we want to be at the table.
Yes, I understand, Councilor Noyes. Mr. Welsh, who have you been contacting so far to let them know that you want to be listed as a stakeholder?
So I've had a discussion with their director of works,
Niagara Falls?
Niagara Falls. I've also had a discussion with the CAO, Mr. Todd, and Tom has had the same discussion with their CAO.
And who are they discussing this with, CN?
Yes.
So I think, yes, I agree with the mayor. I think that we should just let CN know that we want to be included.
I agree.
So can you get on that?
Yes.
Okay, you got your marching orders.
I've done it already.
All right,
Can you-
Councilor Noyes, go
Councilor-
ahead.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Walsh, when you had the conversation with those individuals, did they say, nah, that's not going to happen, or the likelihood of that is slim and none? Or like when you came up with it, was it a big surprise to them? Or like how was that? How did that discussion go on?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It wasn't, I expressed our concerns about additional trains running through Fort Erie, and both of them agreed with our concerns and agreed that we should be at the table.
But no part of the conversation, did it go around this, oh, no, that's not happening. We don't know where you got your information from.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Mayor Redekop?
I'm good.
That, okay. Seeing none, I'll move to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, infrastructure services now in recess.
Thank you very much,
Turn the chair
Councillor.
back to Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lubitz. That takes us to Corporate and Community Services, Councillor Dubineau.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Corporate Services is now open and in session. We have no presentations or delegations. We have no reports. Any new business inquiries? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple. I've been receiving quite a number of phone calls with respect to break and enters in the Ridgeway area. I don't know if there is a high number of incidents currently, but I'm wondering if the acting CAO can check into this with the regional police commissioner, I guess, or chief, and ask them if there is anything that they can do to maybe take a look at it. But the MO seems to be that the perpetrators are walking the streets, assessing the homes, and I guess watching to see what the homeowners do on a regular basis, and then they time their break-ins accordingly. So that's one thing. And then the other thing was brought to my attention through social media with respect to reckless driving by students of GFAS. And in particular, this incident happened last week where a motorbike purposely started the teenager started to skid his motorbike on Highway 3 near the Petro can, and there were a group of kids in another car that were cheering it on and being reckless as well. And the resident in my ward was concerned that it would cause an unforeseen problem in terms of accidents in the future. I wonder, I know that we are supposed to get cameras at the lights here. I'm wondering if that's been done yet? Yeah, it's a maybe.
Yeah.
It's a maybe. And I'm just wondering if there's something that we can do to monitor that situation through the regional police as well.
Yeah, Mr. Walsh, do you want to provide comments on that? I'm young enough to still remember the reckless kids in high school who all drive crazy, and I'm wondering, in addition to what Councillor Butler mentioned, maybe contact the principal of GFES as well to relay this, if that's possible.
I can contact both the principal and the staff sergeant on Tom's behalf and express our concerns. Darn kids.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Anything else?
Sorry, one last question. Through you to Mr. Jansen, I'm just wondering, my Ridgeway BIA would like to hire someone to help them along, but it is a current board member. So would that board member have to resign and then take that post and basically take over the festival?
Mr. Jansen?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Butler. I would have to know a little bit more about the extent to which they would be involved. Initially, I wouldn't think so that it would be necessary, but we can discuss more of the details after.
Perfect. Anything else? Oh, sorry. Yes, Madam Clerk.
If I may, this question was brought to the clerk's office, and we did contact the Ontario BIA Association. It was our feeling that they would have to resign from the board in order to be employed, and that was the answer that we got.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And anything else, Councillor Butler? Perfect. Your Worship, did you have a question?
Just to follow up on the issue out here at the high school, I think equally dangerous is the number of people that blow down Garrison Road in either direction, more particularly if they're going west to east, 80 kilometers an hour or more. They don't regard the stop signs whatsoever. The police officers, when they are here, are parked on the east side of the high school. They're not catching any of that, and it is dangerous. So that we got the kids driving erratically, and now we've got the adults driving erratically. It's not a good recipe. So if there's any possibility of moving forward the possibility of cameras there, that would be good. But maybe also, if you're going to be speaking to the police, if Mr. Walsh is going to be speaking to the police, maybe get them to set up somebody at maybe Rose Hill or closer to Sunset, maybe out in front of Rose Hill Auction, so that they can at least pick up the traffic. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm notoriously fast driver, but I slow down in school zones or areas where the speed limit makes it sense. And I was surprised by a young woman that just blew by me the other day, heading towards the school, didn't slow down, actually weaved in and out of a couple of cars because she must have had a hot appointment at the hairdressers or something. I don't know. Or Tim Hortons.
No, and I appreciate your concerns, Your Worship. My children go to Garrison Road School, so I do see on a regular basis just how fast traffic moves through there. It's very frustrating when I see the flashing lights that say if the school zone is active and that the speed's reduced, to see people weave in and through the compliant drivers. I was very pleased this week to see the NRP actually out there doing some speed patrol. I'm also wondering, perhaps Mr. Walsh could convey this as well, perhaps even involving the OPP, because we switched from regional to provincial jurisdiction of Highway 3 right at that point there. If there might be any possibility of them catching the people who are whipping by at 105 right before it slows down to 60, perhaps we could nip some of that in the bud. I'll leave that with Mr. Walsh if he thinks it's worthwhile doing. But yeah, this is definitely a concern that I share, and I'd like to see this looked into as well. So I appreciate the councillors for bringing that up. Was there anything else, Your Worship?
No, thank you.
All right, perfect. Any other new business inquiries? All right. So seeing none, any questions, comments about the business status report? All right, perfect. So I guess Corporate and Community Services is now closed. I'll hand the chair back to His Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubenel. Are there any meetings that anyone wants us to be aware of? I will point out that tomorrow the lawyers for the Y and the town of Fort Erie will be meeting with respect to, I'll be in attendance, as will the executive director from the Y with respect to the transfer of the property, some issues that we'll be trying to iron out. And Wednesday evening is the town of Fort Erie is helping to host, along with the city of Port Colborne, a number of medical students who will be in town. That's, I think that's at Bridgewater Golf Course. Councillor Dubenel?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. On Wednesday at 5 o'clock here in Council Chambers, we have a quarter revision meeting, another quarter revision meeting for the Glennie Drain. So if it is what it is, so I'm just putting that out there.
Councillor Noyes?
I think we brought it up earlier in the meeting. I think there's an active transportation meeting the same day from 5 to 9. Wednesday, the 11th. So,
That's the public open house.
yes.
Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a Fort Erie Active Transportation Committee meeting being held here tomorrow, Tuesday, September 10th, in Committee Room 1 at 5:30 p.m.
Any others? Councillor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. There's a BIA, Crystal Beach BIA meeting tomorrow at the Fire Hall in Crystal Beach at 6 o'clock.
Any other meetings? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Butler, that was fast. That was fast.
Now I
All
can't-
those in favor?
Now I can't turn it off.
We're adjourned.